The first thing you notice is that the sound is not a sound. It doesn't travel through air. It doesn't vibrate your eardrum. It moves in a way that bypasses the mechanics of hearing altogether, slipping under the skin of your mind like ink through paper fibers. This is the whisper of Thoth. It arrives in the middle of an ordinary moment, a sip of tea, a half-formed thought about errands, and suddenly the air feels charged. The second you are in stretches, its edges ripple. You become acutely aware that the clock is no longer your authority. You don't remember deciding to listen. That's the first mark of being chosen. You didn't volunteer. You were summoned. In that instant, your mind shifts from simply existing in time to feeling time, as though it's a tangible material you can touch. You may not yet know why this whisper has come to you, but the sensation is unmistakable. You are standing in the center of something vast. The whisper does not speak in a language you've learned, yet you understand it. It's like recognizing the meaning of a dream without recalling the details. And it carries with it a strange certainty. This has happened before, and it will happen again. You can't prove that statement, but in the marrow of your bones, you know it's true. For most people, time is a road, arrowing forward. For you, in that instant, it becomes a sphere, no direction, no beginning, no end. You can sense points on its surface, a conversation you had 5 years ago, the decision you will make in 10 days, the version of you that is still a child somewhere. The whisper invites you to walk across these points as though stepping from one stone to another in a still pond. This is where things begin to fracture. You glance around and realize that others are still anchored in the flow you once knew. The bus still pulls away from the curb. Someone's phone still rings. The clock on the wall still ticks. But to you, those sounds now feel performed, like props in a play for which you've seen the script. The disorientation is subtle at first. You might dismiss it as fatigue or a fleeting daydream, but the whisper doesn't fade. If anything, it deepens, layering itself under every mundane exchange. Every second feels slightly off, as though it's a copy of a moment that happened elsewhere, and the one you're experiencing is only a rehearsal. That's when the realization dawns. Not everyone can hear this. You glance at faces in the crowd, searching for any flicker of recognition. Most look through you, their expressions tethered to their own immediate concerns. But here and there, one or two pairs of eyes meet yours with a spark of something else, curiosity, wariness, perhaps even relief. They know, or at least they suspect. This is the second mark of being chosen. You become aware of others like you. Not many, and certainly not loud about it, but they exist, scattered like constellations across the dark. The whisper seems to hum a little louder when they are near, as if acknowledging kinship. In myth, Thoth is the keeper of time, the scribe of the gods, the architect of language itself. His whisper is not meant for the masses. It's not entertainment. It's not guidance. It's an activation. The moment you hear it, something dormant wakes. This awakening is not gentle. It bends what you thought was real, turns it on its side, and hands you the new angle without an instruction manual. You'll start noticing patterns where you once saw coincidences. You'll sense when someone is about to call before the phone lights up. You'll feel an ache before a storm rolls in, not in your joints, but in the structure of the moment itself. It's as if time is no longer an abstract framework, but a living, breathing entity pressing against your perception. And then, always, comes the question, why you? The answer doesn't arrive all at once. It leaks in slowly, like sunlight under a locked door. You were chosen because you were already listening even before you knew what you were listening for. You've always felt the slight shimmer in ordinary events, the faint tug of something behind the scenes. The whisper doesn't create that awareness, it amplifies it. But amplification is not harmless. The more you notice, the harder it becomes to unnotice. Time's imperfections, its overlaps, its seams, its skipped beats, start to show themselves without invitation. You might see a stranger twice in 2 different places in the same afternoon. You might walk into a room and feel you've already had the conversation about to occur. These moments aren't accidents. They're the echo of time bending around you. Whether that bending is for your benefit or whether you're simply in its path is not yet clear. That uncertainty is both the gift and the curse of hearing Thoth's whisper. And the whisper? It continues, unbothered by your confusion. It doesn't explain. It doesn't justify. It simply pulls you deeper into the current until you're not sure where the shore was. That's when you realize there's no turning back to the clock-bound world you once knew. This is the moment the hourglass shatters. Not dramatically, not with shards and noise, but quietly, the sand suspended mid-air. You are inside that stillness now, and time is no longer something you measure. It's something you can bend. You test this new stillness like a floorboard, putting a little weight on it to see if it holds. The world doesn't collapse. It just adjusts. The whisper of Thoth doesn't get louder. It gets more specific. Instead of one continuous hiss, it separates into strands, as if someone is combing light into fibers. Past, present, future, three names for one fabric, begin to make practical sense. And here's the first usable lesson that lands without ceremony. Time is less like pages of a book and more like threads in a rope. Twist one, the rope tightens. Loosen one, the rope softens. Either way, the rope remains whole. You reach for a memory, not to replay it, but to feel its texture. A sun-baked afternoon, the smell of oranges, the roughness of a stone wall under your palm. Instead of fading when you focus on it, the memory thickens, gains threads you hadn't noticed. The drone of a faraway lawnmower, the weight of keys in your pocket, the micro-pause before you answer a question. It's all there, hidden in the weave, waiting. The whisper seems to say, don't stare at the picture. Pinch the cloth. You do, and the present ripples. The oranges smell stronger. Somewhere, the lawnmower coughs back to life. At first, the effect is small and weirdly polite. You nudge a thread, and something obliges. Someone calls as you think of them. A traffic light flips green right as you arrive. But the whisper teaches by repetition, not lectures. The more you pay attention, the more you notice the handholds. A shared joke that repeats with a stranger, a song that follows you store to store, a sentence ending that lands twice in a day like a stamp. You're not manifesting in the self-help sense. You're noticing the warp and weft, pulling where it's already loose, smoothing where it's already bunched. Here's a trick the whisper suggests, as gently as a parent guiding a child's hand. To walk the fabric, you don't jump to another time. You increase overlap. Think of moments as circles on tracing paper. When two circles overlap enough, they become one walkable space. You increase that overlap by pairing sensory anchors. Smell from the past plus emotion from now plus intention toward a future scene equals overlap. You're not teleporting, you're braiding. You're letting the past lend grip to the future, and the future lend meaning to the present. The feeling is familiar and foreign at once, like déjà vu that you can steer. Practice makes the weave obvious. You try it with something small, say, rehearsing a conversation you'll have next week. Most people rehearse with words. You rehearse with threads. You imagine the weight of the chair you'll sit in, texture, the coolness of the glass you'll hold, temperature, the knot in your stomach when a touchy subject arises, emotion. Then, without forcing, you let a memory drift in where the knot felt similar. First job interview, high school stage fright, the time you confessed something scary and didn't implode. You let those threads lie next to the imagined future until they begin to mingle. When the actual conversation arrives, there's less friction. You've already walked the fabric. This isn't about control. The whisper is allergic to that word. It's about relation. You're not time's boss. You're its dance partner. The more you try to lead, the more it steps on your toes. The more you listen for the subtle shift in pressure, the cue before the turn, the smoother the movement becomes. You start to understand why rituals exist across cultures. Not because candles and chants change time, but because they tangle enough threads, sensory, emotional, symbolic, to create thick bridges between moments. Ritual is engineering for the heart. And yet, the mechanics remain tender. Pull too hard on a single thread, obsess over a single outcome, and the weave thins elsewhere. You feel it as hollow victories, delayed costs, a sharp clatter after a triumph. The whisper doesn't scold. It adjusts your hand. Balance, it implies. If you borrow weight from tomorrow, repay it with presence today. You test this by choosing to focus fully on a tiny, unglamorous task, washing a mug. You notice the circular motion of the sponge, the clink as porcelain taps the sink, the clean, faint squeak when the rim dries under a towel. The reward is immediate and irrational. The rest of the day seems to breathe easier, as if grateful you tightened a small loop correctly. Patterns sharpen. You start recognizing the seams where moments meet. Those hushes before a door opens, the silence between warning and laughter, the millisecond when two strangers decide whether to smile. You learn to place a word there, or a breath, or nothing at all. Breathing becomes a tool. Inhale to thicken the present. Exhale to slacken it. Long exhale, more overlap with what's coming, like loosening a knot. Short, sharp inhale, more focus, like pinching the fabric to stop a slide. These aren't metaphors to you anymore. They're dials you can feel. Here's a more advanced observation. The whisper lets slip when it senses you've stopped trying to be clever. Some threads don't belong to you. They pass through you, sure, but they're anchored in other lives, other places, other stories. You can tug, but the response will be slow or strange. Respect those. If you try to weave someone else's thread into your pattern without consent, the fabric resists with odd static, misread texts, missed trains, a weird ache that says you're off map. The antidote isn't withdrawal, it's courtesy. Ask, even silently. Offer something back. Attention, gratitude, a small mercy. Reciprocity makes the cloth kinder. This is also when you notice that past and future are descriptions of perspective, not territories. The past is the part of the fabric where your grip is strong. More threads already braided, more overlap. The future is where your grip is weaker. Fewer braids, looser weave. So the whisper nudges you toward a practical craftsperson's approach. Reinforce what matters behind you so it can bear weight ahead. You write a note you wish you'd had 5 years ago and tuck it somewhere you'll find in a week. You photograph the ordinary breakfast you usually ignore. You mark a song as important, not because it is, but because you decide it will be. These are stitches. Later, when you need them, they're there and the bridge holds. Of course, you experiment. You try walking from a quiet present into a charged memory, just to see if the temperature changes. It does. Tom doesn't care that the calendar disagrees. You're in your grandmother's kitchen, again, not as a ghost, but as a participant with a different angle. You notice a detail you forgot. The crack in the tile shaped like a lightning bolt. You bring that detail back with you, like a thread tied around your finger. In the present, for reasons you don't analyze, you avoid a small mistake because the crack made you look down at your feet at the right second. Cause and effect, yes, but with extra lanes. The whisper has opinions about speed. Slowness is not inherently sacred, and haste is not inherently careless. What time cares about is alignment. If you move fast while aligned, you surf. If you move slow while misaligned, you drag. Alignment announces itself through coherence. Phrases complete themselves. Doors open without knocking. The right person turns up on the hour. Misalignment reveals itself through micro-jams. SIM cards failing, pens drying mid-sentence, names fleeing your tongue. Instead of cursing the jams, you pause and adjust your grip. Change posture, step outside, swap the task order. You're not avoiding difficulty. You're restoring the angle at which the fabric will carry you. Every so often, the whisper lets you glimpse its engine room. You won't see gears or levers. You'll sense agreements, tiny treaties between moments. If you listen here, a moment seems to say, I'll carry you there. It's transactional in the softest way. You honor a promise you made to yourself last month, and 2 promises you didn't know you made last year loosen their knots. You apologize sincerely today, and a future apology you're going to need dissolves. These aren't miracles. They're settlements. The fabric likes settled accounts. And there's playfulness in it, too. The whisper has humor. It hides Easter eggs to reward your attention. Patterns of numbers on receipts, street names that form a sentence if you read them in order, a billboard that completes a thought you muttered to no one. You learn not to treat these as gravestones of destiny, but as winked confirmations. Yes, you're following the right thread. If you take the joke, the next bridge is laid. If you demand a contract, the lights flicker and the room goes ordinary. Time prefers flirtation to interrogation. Eventually, the practicality of all this bleeds into the bones of your day. You schedule appointments at times that feel breathable. You prep for difficult tasks by thickening overlap ahead of them with simple rituals, a glass of water, a particular playlist, the same chair. You end days by sowing tiny endings, a review, a preparation, a thank you to the version of you that got you here. The result isn't a life free of mishaps. It's a life where mishaps have handles. You can grab and turn them, learn their weight, feel where they connect to earlier threads, and reposition them rather than being flattened under them. All the while, the whisper does what it always does. It stays slightly out of definition, more instructor than law, more tempo than command. It never once says, do this. It says, notice that. It doesn't ask you to kill suspense by peeking at every future. It invites you to braise the present until it's flavorful enough to feed what's next. And when you've learned this much, one more capacity arrives almost embarrassingly quietly, the ability to step across an overlap on purpose, to walk from one moment into another because you've braided enough threads between them that the crossing becomes simple, like stepping from one stone to the next across a narrow stream. You try it gently. You set the table for a conversation that hasn't happened, pair it with the texture of a memory that supports it, breathe in to thicken, exhale to loosen, and then, without ceremony, you're in it earlier than expected, the words already softened, the outcome slightly kinder. You didn't break anything. You didn't force anything. You walked the fabric. And as you do, the whisper hums its quiet approval, not as praise, but as proof that the cloth was always meant to be walked by those willing to feel its threads. The first thing you feel when the skill becomes second nature is not power, it's weight. The whisper of Thoth never promised that bending time would be easy or without cost. It only opened the door. Now you're inside, and the room is vast, its ceiling lost in shadow, its walls hung with strands you've already touched. Some are bright, some are frayed, some are knotted so tightly they hum like bees, and each one is yours to remember. This is the burden of awareness, the knowing that every step leaves an imprint, and every imprint persists somewhere. Most people don't have to see those traces. You do. It starts with small jolts. You sense when someone's words will bruise them later, not because you're guessing at their feelings, but because you see the bruise forming in the weave before the sound is even finished. You walk into a cafe and catch a thread linking the barista's hurried smile to a fight they haven't had yet with their sister. You can't intervene in everything, and you shouldn't. But you know it's there, and the knowing is a weight in your pocket. The whisper doesn't apologize for this weight. It treats it like a tool you must learn to carry. It reminds you, again without words, that awareness without humility becomes intrusion. You are not here to fix every knot. You are here to recognize which ones are yours to loosen. That discernment takes practice, and it's messy. Sometimes the burden feels like loneliness. Once you hear the whisper, silence is never truly silent. You carry an invisible map layered over every conversation, every movement. It shows you where time has been, where it might go, and where it refuses to tread. You watch friends and strangers barrel past a seam in the fabric without a second glance, oblivious to the fact that they've just crossed a hinge that will swing open months later. You might envy them, this innocence of momentum. They live entirely inside the arrow of time, never stopping to notice that it bends. They feel surprise fully, grief fully, joy fully, without sensing the pre-echo. You, on the other hand, feel the tremor before the quake. When joy arrives, you've already brushed against it in the weave. When loss arrives, you've already seen the shadow of its thread. The moments still move you, but they no longer blindside you. And sometimes you miss being blindsided. But the whisper chose you for a reason, and part of that reason is your tolerance for carrying what others cannot. This doesn't mean you're stronger. It means you're willing. There's a difference. Willingness is active. It demands you decide, again and again, to keep listening when it would be easier to pretend you don't hear. With willingness comes responsibility. You start noticing that your choices ripple farther than you imagined. A single decision, what to say, whether to act, when to delay, doesn't just alter your own path. It bumps threads that connect to others, sometimes across great distances. The whisper makes you aware of these links, not to paralyze you, but to sharpen your care. It's like carrying a lantern in a dark maze. You can't light the whole place, but you can make sure your steps don't crush the seedlings on the floor. Every so often, you're faced with what the whisper calls a loaded moment. You'll feel it before it arrives. The weave tenses, threads around you hum in dissonance. The air grows taut. In a loaded moment, small actions matter disproportionately. A sentence spoken lightly could harden into a barrier for someone else. A choice to pause could allow a door to remain open. You can't dodge these moments. They seek you out, but you can meet them with deliberate presence. The burden, of course, is that you'll never know exactly how the moment plays out in every direction. You might see 2 or 3 possible outcomes, but the full lattice is beyond you. The whisper reminds you that you're not here to manage every thread, only to act in a way that leaves the fabric stronger where you touched it. There's also the matter of memory. Ordinary memory is linear. It moves in a single file from yesterday to today. Your memory, now, is layered. You don't just recall events. You recall their position in the weave, their overlaps, the threads they connected to. This means you remember some things in startling clarity. The way sunlight hit a table in 2009, the exact weight of a book in your hands last spring. But it also means you carry echoes of futures that haven't happened yet. And those echoes don't always fade. Some futures will call to you, and you'll feel the ache of not being able to make them real without crossing lines the whisper warns you against. Others will haunt you with their inevitability, even as you try to soften them. And still others will dissolve, leaving you with the phantom sensation of a life you'll never live. This is not a tragedy, exactly. It's simply the texture of awareness. But it's heavy. To live with this burden, you adapt. You develop rituals for releasing threads you can't hold. Maybe you write them down and burn the page. Maybe you walk until your body insists on being the only thing you can feel. Maybe you speak them aloud to no one, letting the air take them. These aren't superstitions, they're maintenance. Without them, the threads would tangle in your hands until you couldn't tell one from another. You also learn to anchor yourself in moments that require no bending, no weaving. Moments where time is allowed to be exactly what it is. Eating something warm, watching a storm, listening to someone laugh without analyzing the thread it will pull later. These pauses aren't a retreat. They're a reminder that you're part of the fabric, too, not just its keeper. The hardest part to accept is that you will make mistakes. You will pull the wrong thread. You will step too soon or too late. You will misread the hum of the weave. And when you do, the result will feel bigger than it is because you'll see the extra ripples you caused. The whisper does not shield you from this pain. It lets you feel it, so you learn. Over time, you realize that mistakes also teach you about resilience, that even a damaged thread can be rewoven if you return to it with care. The burden of awareness doesn't end. It becomes part of your posture, your way of walking through the world. You don't set it down at night. You simply adjust to its weight, the way a seasoned traveler adjusts to a pack. And in moments of clarity, you remember that the weight itself is a kind of gift. It means you are trusted with something rare. The whisper never congratulates you. It doesn't need to. The reward is in the texture of the fabric when you touch it and feel it hold, strong and steady, because you've been there tending it, invisible to most, but essential to the pattern. And as you move through your days with this knowledge, you begin to notice something subtle. The burden becomes lighter when shared. Another pair of eyes meets yours with that spark again, the recognition. You nod, and in that nod, a silent treaty is made. We carry this together. The whisper hums its approval, not as an ending, but as a reminder that the path ahead will demand just as much willingness as the one behind. The longer you walk with the whisper, the more you realize that you are not alone, nor were you ever. The fabric of time has its own community, though it doesn't announce itself with banners or meetings. It's a niche hidden in plain sight, and once you've stepped inside, it's impossible not to recognize its other members. They are not a uniform people. Some are loud and brimming with charisma. Others are quiet, almost invisible in a crowd. Some work in laboratories, decoding the mathematics of the universe. Others brew tea in back rooms, tending to the smallest ripples in the weave. What unites them is not their lifestyle or skill set, it's the way they listen. You see it in the tilt of their head during a pause, in the way they delay their answer by half a breath, letting the moment settle before moving it forward. Your first encounters feel accidental. You're seated next to someone on a train who makes a remark that completes a thought you hadn't spoken aloud. Or you pass a street musician whose melody echoes a dream you had the night before. You exchange a glance that feels like an exchange of credentials, though no words confirm it. This is how the niche greets its own, without fanfare, without claiming territory. Soon, you start to detect more deliberate signals. A particular phrase, repeated twice in a conversation, placed exactly where the weave hums. A seemingly throwaway story told for your ears alone. Its timing too perfect to be coincidence. The niche uses subtlety as its handshake because overt recognition could disrupt the fabric. If you declare yourself too loudly, the threads recoil. But if you let the recognition stay soft, the connection grows like roots meeting underground. You begin to understand that each member of this niche has their own relationship with the whisper. For some, it's a constant hum, guiding every step. For others, it comes in bursts, offering clarity only when the stakes are high. Some treat it as an oracle, others as a conversation partner, others still as a mischievous companion that hides answers until the last moment. In time, you discover your own role among them. You may be a thread finder, someone who can spot loose ends and gently weave them back. Or perhaps you're a knot keeper, guarding certain tensions in the fabric until they're ready to be resolved. There are bridge builders, adept at creating overlaps between moments for others to walk. And there are pattern readers, who can step back far enough to see the grand motif forming. You might be more than one of these, or shift between them as the weave requires. The niche is not a hierarchy. There are no ranks, no promotions, no retirements. Instead, it's a network of overlapping circles, each formed by shared threads. You may belong to one circle for years, working alongside others to tend a particular segment of time, only to find yourself drifting into another circle when your part is done. The departures are not farewells. They are transitions, as natural as moving from one season to the next. And the work, because it is work, even if it looks nothing like a job, is not always glorious. Sometimes you hold a moment steady for someone else, knowing they'll never realize it was you. Sometimes you let go of a thread you've tended for months because the weave demands it. Sometimes you deliver a truth that will make someone angry in the short term, but will strengthen their fabric in the long run. In this niche, patience is currency, and trust is built on acts that go unseen. But there are also moments of undeniable beauty. The times when you and another member of the niche are working in quiet synchrony, and you feel the weave tighten into something luminous. The moments when you see a knot dissolve without force, just because enough of you tended it from different angles. Or when a bridge you've been building for years finally carries someone across, and they step onto the other side without stumbling. These moments don't make headlines. They don't trend, but they hum with a kind of satisfaction that seeps into your bones. The whisper seems to approve of this quiet cooperation. It rewards it with deeper access. Threads that were once faint become clearer, overlaps easier to navigate. You notice that when you're aligned with others in the niche, your own weaving feels smoother, less effortful, as though the fabric itself is grateful for the collaboration. Of course, not everyone in the niche works toward the same aims. There are those who bend time for personal gain, hoarding moments for themselves, weaving patterns that serve no one else. The whisper does not forbid this, but it doesn't favor it either. The fabric becomes brittle under selfish hands, And while they may achieve short-term victories, the long-term pattern often unravels. You will cross paths with these individuals. Sometimes they will try to recruit you. Other times, they will see you as an obstacle. Here, the niche relies on its quiet agreements. No open wars, no showdowns. Just a subtle recalibration of the weave, rebalancing, redirecting, sometimes simply waiting until the brutal pattern collapses under its own weight. You learn that patience can be more effective than confrontation, and that the most potent moves are often invisible. Over time, you find your sense of belonging deepening. You begin to notice that certain places hum with the same frequency as the niche. Markets at dawn, libraries at closing, empty train platforms just before the arrival. You learn that certain times of day are more porous, easier for threads to cross. Dusk, the hour before sunrise, the middle of the night when the world's chatter is at its lowest. These become your meeting grounds, whether or not you plan the meetings. And the more you belong, the more the burden of awareness from before transforms into something else. It becomes a shared weight, distributed across many shoulders. You realize you don't have to catch every thread alone, because someone else will be there to take the ones you can't reach. The niche doesn't need you to be everything. It needs you to be yourself, tuned as clearly as you can be to the whisper. You may go weeks without speaking to another member, but the connection remains. A book you needed will appear on a bench. A door will stay open a moment longer than physics allows. A message will arrive with no sender's name, but exactly the right words. These aren't accidents. They're the quiet ways the niche tells you, we're here, and we're working with you. And in this way, your role shifts from solitary listener to participant in a greater design. The whisper is still yours. It still hums in your own voice when you're alone. But now it's also part of a chorus. And the chorus can bend time in ways no single voice could. You no longer wonder why you were chosen. The reason is woven into the work itself, because the fabric needed your specific hands, your specific listening. And in return, it has given you a place among others who know exactly what that means. You begin to sense it long before the moment arrives, the subtle tightening of threads, the way certain overlaps grow brighter, denser. The whisper has led you here piece by piece, never revealing the whole picture until you've stood in the right place to see it. Now, for the first time, you realize that the path is not just something you follow. It's something you shape. This is how you close the loop. Closing the loop isn't about ending a story. It's about sealing a seam in the fabric so it no longer frays. Sometimes the loop is small, like finally returning a borrowed book years after you forgot you had it. Sometimes it's monumental, like forgiving someone you thought you'd carry resentment toward forever. In either case, the process feels the same, a gentle but undeniable pull toward completion. The whisper rarely tells you why a loop needs closing. That's not your concern. Your task is simply to feel the pull and follow it. When you do, there's a shift, not dramatic, not cinematic, but palpable. A hum you didn't know was there goes quiet. A weight you didn't realize you carried lifts. The air around you feels a fraction more breathable. The first loops you close are almost accidental. You're tidying a drawer and stumble on a letter you never sent. You finally mail it. You bump into an old friend you parted from awkwardly. You smile instead of avoiding them. Each act sends a ripple back through the threads, tightening something loose. You start to notice that the present becomes steadier when the past is mended. But then, the loops start to choose you. The whisper directs you toward moments that require conscious action, sometimes difficult action. It might guide you to revisit a place you swore you'd never return to, or to speak a truth you've carried like a stone in your pocket, or to step into a future you've been avoiding because it demands more of you than you thought you could give. When you answer these calls, you see the change in the weave. Threads that once resisted your touch now lie flat and strong. Overlaps that were weak suddenly hold. It's not magic, it's maintenance. But maintenance at this scale changes the feel of the whole fabric. Not all loops are personal. Some belong to the niche as a whole. You might be asked, though asked isn't quite the right word, to take part in closing a loop that spans years, maybe centuries. You may never understand the full reach of it, only your portion. Sometimes that portion is to hold still while others work. Sometimes it's to deliver a message at exactly the right moment. Sometimes it's to bend time just enough that two paths intersect. The whisper trusts you with these tasks without ever explaining its trust, and you learn to trust it in return. Closing a loop often benefits you in ways you don't see until much later. It's as if the act itself changes your position in the weave, placing you where other important threads can reach you. There's a responsibility in shaping time, even subtly. Each loop you close is also a choice. You're deciding which version of events becomes the one that endures. This is why the whisper never hurries you. It waits until your listening is deep enough to choose without selfishness. That doesn't mean without desire. You are still human, but without the impulse to bend everything toward yourself. You begin to see that the fabric has its own form of memory. When you close a loop with care, the fabric remembers your touch. Later, when you face a knot too tangled to undo alone, help arrives, not always in the form you expect, but in the form you need. A door opens. A thread slackens. A piece of knowledge comes to you as if whispered by the air. You've given to the weave, and now the weave gives back. The most profound loops are the ones that bend time itself. They don't just tidy the past or smooth the present. They alter how the future arrives. You might change the timing of an encounter so that it happens when both people are ready. You might delay a decision just long enough for new information to surface. You might bring forward a realization that would have taken years to ripen. In these moments, you feel the bend. It's not a violent twist, more like reshaping clay with your hands. You press here, ease there, and the form shifts on your touch. And when the moment plays out, there's a clarity in it, as though it always should have happened this way. That's when you understand bending time isn't about defying fate. It's about finding the path where the pattern sings in tune. Eventually, you face the loop that is entirely yours. Not shared, not assigned, not part of a larger design, just yours. You recognize it instantly, even if you've been avoiding it for years. It's the thread that runs through every other moment you've tended, the quiet current beneath every hum you've heard. Closing it will cost you something. The whisper doesn't hide that fact. You prepare as you've learned to, by weaving overlap between past courage and present need, between the fear you once survived and the decision you now face. You anchor yourself in the niche, knowing that even if this loop is yours alone, the strength you've gained came from all the hands that have worked alongside yours. When you finally act, it feels less like a climax and more like an exhale you've been holding since before you can remember. The thread tightens, the hum fades, the fabric holds. Afterward, the world feels the same on the surface. The streetlights still hum. The seasons still turn. But you can sense that something in the weave has shifted. You've shaped the time that will remember you, not as a hero, not as a savior, but as one who listened and answered. The whisper doesn't congratulate you. It simply carries on, softer now, as if satisfied that you know the way without constant guidance. You're not done. There will always be new knots, new overlaps, new loops, but you've stepped into a place where you act not out of confusion or compulsion, but choice. And that, you realize, was the point all along. The whisper was never about telling you what to do. It was about teaching you how to hear, so that when the moment came, you would know which loops to close, which threads to protect, and which paths to shape. The loop is closed. The weave is whole, for now. And as you walk forward, the fabric walks with you. Now that the loop has closed, the story doesn't dissolve. It lingers in the fabric like a faint warmth after a candle has been blown out. You carry that warmth with you, not as nostalgia, but as a reminder that time is not a single road you travel. It is the cloth you help maintain. Every step you take now is informed by the listening you've practiced, the patience you've sharpened, and the threads you've chosen to honor. You find yourself moving through the world differently. Not slower, not faster, just steadier. You no longer rush to chase every bend in the weave, because you trust that what needs to reach you will find its way. You no longer cling to every moment out of fear it will vanish, because you know that no true moment is ever lost. It's simply resting in another fold of the fabric, waiting for you to touch it again. The niche is still there, scattered and quiet. Sometimes you cross paths with another member in a way that feels orchestrated by the whisper itself. Sometimes weeks pass without a single sign. But whether they are near or far, the connection hums, a subtle acknowledgement that you are never truly working alone. You also see the rest of the world with more compassion. Those who rush past the seams, unaware, are not lesser. They're simply walking a different part of the pattern. Some may never hear the whisper, and that's as it should be. Others may hear it years from now, and when they do, you'll be ready to meet their gaze, to nod in recognition, to let them know they've stepped into a wider map. The whisper remains, though it no longer needs to be loud. It's woven into your own inner voice now, a constant undercurrent that you can lean toward whenever the fabric feels tense or unclear. You know how to read the overlaps. You know how to walk the bridges. You know when to let a thread rest and when to weave it into something stronger. In the end, you understand that being chosen was never about status or privilege. It was about responsibility and about trust. The trust that you would learn to carry the burden without letting it crush you. The trust that you would tend the weave without claiming it as your own. The trust that when the moment came to shape time, you would do so with care. And so you walk forward, not as a keeper of secrets, but as a custodian of patterns. The future is not fixed, but neither is it formless. It waits for your touch, just as the past waited for your listening. And somewhere, just beyond the edge of your hearing, the whisper of Thoth curves through the folds of time, bending the next moment toward you.